will Frank Warren once again take over and become the #1 British promoter? And obviously I'm saying this in the wake of Anthony Joshua's loss to Andy Ruiz, and also the fact that many matchroom fighters over the past, 6, 7, 8, 9 months have been going over to the United States rather than fighting in the UK. This has left a void in British boxing, which Frank Warren could potentially fill. Now that he's with BT, which is a proper outfit in terms of a broadcaster, he's got a lot of money behind him. He's got a burgeoning stable of fighters, including the all-important heavyweights, because we're in the era of heavyweights right now. It's the most popping division, the most lit division, whatever word you want to use to describe it. So he's got a burgeoning stable of heavyweights. There's a real opportunity now for Frank Warren, who, look, I'm very critical of Frank Warren in many aspects, particularly in terms of the way he's treated many fighters over the years. But one thing I've always said about the man is that he is extremely determined. I mean, Frank Warren is like the flipping Terminator. This guy will not be stopped. He is fiercely competitive. He is a man who was shot and nearly killed at one stage of his career, but checked himself out of hospital, what was it, like a week or several weeks early, because he couldn't bear the thought of his rivals gaining an advantage over him in business while he was sitting in a hospital bed. All right, so this is a man who has incredible determination and who is a ferocious competitor. So there's an opportunity here for this ferocious competitor to finally overtake Eddie Hearn, because he's been second place in the UK for a long time now. Obviously, Frank Warren was the #1 British promoter for many, many years back in his heyday. But in recent years, he's been second place and not really close to Eddie Hearn for a long time. But now the gap is never as, the gap right now between Hearn and Warren hasn't been this close in an extremely long time. Probably not since Eddie Hearn started out when he first got that deal with Sky. The gap has never been as close as it is now. So will Warren take advantage of that opportunity? Well, the main issue with Frank Warren, at least for me, in terms of his success over the past few years, has been the quality of the shows. Has he put on competitive fights? Yes, he has. Has he put on many competitive shows? Yes, he has. But he hasn't had the kind of marquee fighters that you would need to compete with a matchroom. And when I say marquee, I'm talking about not just world champions, etc., but fighters who are going to be entertaining. And one thing which is always going to help you by way of entertainment with the public is putting on heavyweight fights. The public want to see heavyweights fight each other. Yeah. Now that Frank Warren has kind of not only cottoned onto that, but signed himself a bunch of heavyweights, he now has the opportunity to put on shows, which could put Matchroom under serious pressure, because it's the heavyweight era right now. He signed Daniel Dubois, which is a great signing for him. He's matched him with Nathan Gorman, and that show is the most excited I've been for a Frank Warren show in at least 5 or 6 years, is the Dubois Gorman show with Joyce against Jennings on the undercard. That's a great show as far as I'm concerned. I'm really looking forward to that show. That's a great move by Warren. But it is unfortunate if you're somebody who's hoping for Warren to take over from Eddie Hearn. It is unfortunate that Tyson Fury is having his next few fights in the United States, because we've just seen AJ get battered by Ruiz. There's a huge void there. If only Frank Warren could have Tyson Fury fight in the UK for his next few fights, particularly against legit opposition. If he was to fight a Dylan White or anybody legit for his next few fights, that would really strike a huge blow to Matchroom. That would be an example of Frank Warren taking full advantage over Matchroom's current predicament. So yeah, from the perspective of anybody who's supporting Warren and hoping to see him do well, that is a missed opportunity not having Tyson Fury fight in the UK, over the next year or so. That's a missed opportunity. But be that as it may, the likes of Dubois against Gorman, Joe Joyce on his cards and stuff like that, definitely a major plus. And as far as the lighter weights go, I like, the Billy Joe Saunders Stevenage fight, even though it was against a weak opponent. I just like the fact that doing boxing in a different part of the country, which doesn't normally get to see championship fights, I think that's a good move. All right. Josh Warrington obviously has this big support base in Leeds. And it's going to be an important fighter for Frank Warren, but he's not going to be a major pay-per-view seller the way a heavyweight can be. So it's really going to be dependent on whether Frank Warren can get his heavyweights to the level of pay-per-view stars. That's what he needs. Obviously, Tyson Fury is doing pay-per-views, but he needs to be doing pay-per-views in the UK if he's going to take full advantage right now. Yeah. And you have to imagine that the likes of Joyce, Gorman, and Dubois are quite a ways off when it comes to, pay-per-view. So we'll see how it goes. But Frank Warren's position is certainly much stronger now than it has been at any point over the past, 5-6 years. Definitely closing the gap between him and Matchroom, and he might take over again. And, again, I've always said this about Frank Warren. His determination is quite incredible. You look at Frank Warren's kids, Francis Warren and, his other kid. Look at their demeanor. Look at their eyes. They do not have the determination of their old man. And that's no disrespect to either of them. Okay. But sometimes you're just born with something. And Frank Warren was born with an unbelievable determination. It's actually quite scary. Yeah, actually quite scary. He's a very formidable adversary, this man. Whether you like him or loathe him, think he's a good guy or a bad guy, you definitely have to respect him as an adversary. Anybody who don't respect Frank Warren as an adversary, or even just Frank Warren in terms of the shows he's put on over the years. Certainly back in the 90s, Frank Warren was putting on fantastic shows. I mean, incredible shows he was putting on back then. Over the past few years, it's been pretty weak for him, but it's starting to improve now. So we'll see what he can do, and we'll see whether Eddie Hearn can actually respond, because of course Frank Warren wasn't brought up with a silver spoon in his mouth. Yeah. Eddie Hearn, like Frank Warren's kids, was. Frank Warren's kids haven't had the vision or the determination of an Eddie Hearn, but does Eddie Hearn have the determination of a Frank Warren? We're going to find out. Yeah, now that the funding of both promotional outfits is a bit more even now, we're going to find out whether Hearn can actually hack the pace, because Hearn's dad couldn't hack it against Frank Warren. Let's be real. Barry Hearn bailed out of boxing because he couldn't hack the competition with people like Frank Warren. So we'll see whether Hearn can hack it or not. I mean, Hearn has alluded to coming out of boxing if the business is no longer working, of turning his back on it, just like his dad Barry. Because for them, it really is about the money more so than about the sport itself. With Frank Warren, he always says that, he's a boxing man through and through. He's not an accountant, right? He's just a boxing man. And so there's nothing else for him other than boxing. When Barry Hearn turned his back on boxing, he had other interests. Frank Warren doesn't. With him, it's boxing or it's nothing. But is that because he loves the sport so much? I think Frank Warren definitely loves boxing, but more than anything, Frank Warren loves being the top dog in his particular field. I think that's what really drives him, is competition and defeating the competition. That's what drives him, and it just so happens that his field is boxing. If Frank Warren was in a different field, I'm sure he'd be just as ferocious and just as competitive. He's just a very fiercely competitive man, Frank Warren. So At his age, what is he, like 60 something now, nearly 70? And he's going as hard as he is. I mean, many people, let's be real, would have quit a long time ago in Frank Warren's position, particularly when he left Sky and then Sky did this exclusive promotional deal with Hearn. Many promoters would have quit. I mean, many promoters did quit. Dave Coldwell quit. You know, Frank Maloney basically quit. Well, many promoters in Warren's position would have quit, but he is so frighteningly determined that that not only did he not quit, he went away and started his own television company, and he built it up to a certain level, then jumped over to BT, and he's in a very strong position again. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about Frank Warren and his business, whether he can finally take over as the #1 promoter in the UK again and surpass Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. Drop it all in the comments below. And at the end of the day, competition between the promoters is good for the fans. It is good because they're both driving each other on to provide better value for money, to produce, better talent, to put on better shows, to put on more competitive fights. They're both driving each other on to do that. So it's good for the fans. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's hammer them out. Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.